Hey, did you know that over 90% of our viewers watch our videos but haven't subscribed yet? If you enjoy these true trucker horror stories, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It's free and really motivates us to keep the stories rolling. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's stories. The night presses close against the open road, carrying a silence that feels almost alive. Welcome to the sleep haunt where truth lingers in the shadows and fear rides quietly at your side. Tonight, we bring you 5 true most haunting trucker horror stories encounters, born from deserted highways, dim rest stops, and long stretches of darkness where something unseen kept pace with the wheels. Before we begin, we've set a goal. Let's reach 100 likes on this video. Tap that like button now and help us keep rolling deeper into the dark. And share your city and the time you're listening in the comments. Let's see who's awake with us on the night road. Now, settle in, breathe slow, and listen. The road remembers everything. Story number 1. On a long, lonely slice of interstate that cut through cornfields and empty plains, there was a stretch the drivers called the Divide. It wasn't marked on any official map, just a long section between 2 small towns where the land dipped and the cell signal died. Some drivers said it was only about 30 miles. Others swore that, at night, it felt like much more. Daniel had been driving that route for over 10 years. He liked the late runs, fewer cars, fewer delays, and a kind of peace you only found when most of the world had gone to sleep. The truck's engine was constant company, a steady vibration under his feet, a sound he knew better than most voices. That night, the sky was covered in low clouds, turning the world into a narrow tunnel of darkness ahead of his headlights. The dashboard glowed in quiet shades of green and amber. His trailer was loaded with refrigerated produce, nothing unusual, headed toward a distribution center a few states over. He glanced at the digital clock above the wheel. 1:14 a.m. He had just passed the last small town before the Divide. After this, nothing but scattered farmhouses and the blank line of the interstate for a long time. His coffee sat in the cup holder, still warm. The radio murmured in the background, low enough not to compete with his thoughts. As he rolled deeper into the night, the stations began to drift into static. It always happened here. He clicked through them out of habit, trying to catch a clear signal, found only a faint, crackling country song, then nothing. He turned the radio off. The quiet blanket of road noise wrapped around him. The first odd thing happened at mile marker 212. He saw a shape ahead on the shoulder, a small blue sedan, pulled over with its hazard lights blinking weakly. As he approached, he let off the accelerator a touch, watching. It looked old, maybe from the late 90s. The paint faded and patchy even in his dim headlights. There was no one outside the car. No one waving for help. Just the sedan, tilted slightly into the gravel, one of its brake lights dimmer than the other. He checked his mirrors, but the interstate behind him was empty. No other headlights, no approaching traffic. Just his own red taillights glowing in the darkness as he went by. Could have broken down hours ago, he murmured, more to the quiet cab than to anyone in particular. It wasn't his first abandoned vehicle. People left them for all kinds of reasons. He drove on, the blue sedan slipping away into the rear view. Its hazard lights winking smaller and smaller until they were gone. The next 10 minutes were ordinary, straight road, no exits. The farmland on either side, a dark, featureless sea. Then he saw another glimmer of orange ahead. A small car on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. He lifted his foot again and squinted. A blue sedan. Same faded paint, same weak left brake light, same tilt into the gravel. The hair on his arms rose. He glanced at the clock. 1:14 a.m. He frowned. That couldn't be right. It had been at least 10 minutes since he'd checked the time. Maybe longer. He tapped the glass with his knuckle, then pressed the button on the end of the wiper stalk to check the secondary display. That smaller clock read 1:25 a.m., so one clock was wrong. He passed the sedan more slowly this time. He looked for details he might have missed before. The back bumper had a sticker on it, worn almost white with age. A sun-faded rectangle, where something had once been printed. The rear window had a single plastic hanger hooked over the glass. No movement inside, no silhouette. He watched it in the mirror again as it faded behind him, his truck alone on the road. This stretch makes people jumpy, he told himself under his breath. 2 old sedans in one night, that's all. But his hands closed a little tighter around the steering wheel. The CB radio crackled to life. even though he hadn't heard a voice on it for almost an hour. "Anyone else catching this?" a distant fuzzy voice asked. The signal was weak, the words warping around the edges. Daniel leaned toward the mic but didn't reach for it. The CB was mostly quiet these days. A lot of drivers didn't bother with it anymore. The same voice came again, clearer this time, but with an odd echo, like it was bouncing off the inside of a tunnel. "Stuck on the divide. Clock's wrong. Seeing the same mile over and over. Anyone?" Daniel swallowed. The word divide lodged uneasily in his mind. He looked at the passing marker on the right. Lambe-Ishar. His fingers hovered over the mic. Then the voice cut out in a wash of static so sudden it made him blink. The engine hummed on. The tires cleared water from the pavement with a faint, whispering hiss. Nothing ahead but darkness. He checked the time again, for no good reason. The overhead clock said 1:14 a.m. The smaller one on the display said 1:32 a.m. He drove in silence for a while after that, eyes scanning the shoulder, the mirrors, the faint band of road visible in his headlights. The sky seemed to press down even lower. The world had shrunk to his cab, his trailer, and a line of white reflectors vanishing into the dark. 10 minutes later, he saw it again. A flicker of orange on the right. Blink, 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 blink. A blue sedan on the shoulder. Faded paint. Tilted into the gravel. The same sticker. The same plastic hanger in the rear window. His foot eased onto the brake without him thinking about it. The speedometer dropped slowly. He did not pass it this time. He rolled down to a crawl and pulled onto the shoulder a safe distance behind the car, hazard lights clicking on. The night swallowed the sound of his engine as it dropped to a low idle. He checked his mirrors. Nothing but the dim red glow of his own lights on wet pavement. The blue sedan sat ahead like a deserted boat on a black sea. He felt the reluctance settle into his chest, heavy and clear. Every safety guideline said to be careful approaching any vehicle at night, especially on a deserted stretch of road. But something about leaving it unexplored felt worse. He clicked on his high beams. The sedan brightened, details sharpening. The trunk was slightly ajar, the gap just wide enough to notice. The windows were dark. He unbuckled, reached behind the seat for his heavy flashlight, and opened the door. The air outside was cool and damp, carrying the faint smell of wet soil and something metallic from his own truck. Stepping down, he listened. Nothing. No insects, no distant engines. Just the soft ticking of his cooling brakes and the low drone of his idling diesel. He walked slowly toward the sedan, boots crunching over gravel. Each step felt too loud. "Hello?" he called out, voice steady, even though something inside him wanted to whisper instead. "You need help?" No answer. He reached the back of the car. The trunk's latch was corroded. The paint was chipped in the exact same places he thought he'd seen before. His fingers brushed a faint dent near the taillight. Without quite meaning to, he looked at the rear bumper sticker more closely. In the beam of his flashlight, he could just make out the ghost of letters that had been sun-bleached almost into nothing. Divide County Fair. 2003. He straightened slowly, the beam of light wandering across the plate. The numbers were smeared with dust, barely readable. He moved to the driver's side window and shone the light in. The seats were worn but empty. No trash, no personal things. Nothing that suggested someone had been there recently. The keys were not in the ignition, and yet the hazard lights were flashing. A gentle click, click, click echoed inside the silent car. He stood there for a few long breaths, listening to that small artificial heartbeat, watching it reflect faintly off the inside of the windshield. Behind him, his truck idled patiently, lights glowing on the side of the road like a grounded ship. He thought about opening the trunk. The thought came with an immediate cold weight. Nothing said there would be anything terrible inside. There would probably be nothing at all. But every instinct he had told him that if he opened it, something would start that he couldn't simply walk away from. He stepped back instead, giving the car a wide berth as he walked in an arc back to his cab, boots crunching steadily. He climbed up, closed the door a little harder than he meant to, and locked it. The truck felt safer somehow, its familiar interior wrapping around him. He checked both clocks again. 1:14 a.m. 1:14 a.m. He stared at them, then set his phone into the holder and lit up the screen. 1:47 a.m. The phone's GPS map showed his position clearly. A blue triangle on a simple line of highway. According to it, He'd been on the divide for nearly 40 minutes already. He should have been almost clear of it. Yet when he pulled back onto the road and rolled forward, the next green sign he saw on the right side of the highway read, Exit 210, Divide County Line, 2 miles. He had seen that exit sign a dozen times over the years, but he should have passed it long ago on this drive. The CB crackled again. No warning, just sound, as if someone had flipped a switch. Don't stop, a voice said, thin and distorted by static. If you stop, you stay. The hair on the back of his neck prickled. He reached slowly for the mic this time, thumb hesitating over the button. Breaker, he said, voice low and careful. Who's out there? For a moment, only static answered. Then there was a faint sound, like someone sighing, or maybe shifting in a seat far away. Keep moving, the voice whispered. No matter what you see. Don't answer. Don't pick him up. Pick who up? Daniel asked, though part of him did not want to know. The answer was lost in a rush of white noise, a long, rising hiss that faded back into silence. He drove on, eyes roaming the darkness ahead, looking now not just for abandoned cars, but for anything at all on the shoulder. His thoughts circled tight, trying to fit this into something ordinary. Crosstalk from a distant channel, a prank, a glitch. But the way the clocks kept disagreeing, the way the same sedan had appeared, pulled at something deeper. After another 15 minutes, when the GPS insisted he should be almost out of Divide County, he saw movement ahead on the right side of the road. A person. A figure standing just beyond the white line, thumb out, arms stretched toward the passing lanes in the old universal signal, hitchhiker. The beam of his headlights swept closer, drawing the figure into focus. A man, tall and slightly hunched, wearing a reflective safety vest over a dark jacket. A duffel bag at his feet. His face was turned away, obscured by the raised hood of his coat. Daniel's hands tightened on the wheel. His foot hovered, just for a fraction of a second, over the brake pedal. Don't answer. Don't pick him up. The voice from the CB replayed itself in his mind, matching the quiet warning tone of his own instincts. As the truck neared, the hitchhiker's head turned very slowly, as if he could feel the gaze from the cab. For a moment, his face was in profile, then more fully visible. There was nothing extraordinary about him. Pale, nervous, maybe in his 30s, but his eyes were strange not in the way they looked, but in the way they seemed to track the truck with a calm that didn't match his situation. No urgency. No hope. Just a patient, watchful waiting, like someone who had all the time in the world. Daniel kept his speed steady. He did not meet those eyes for more than a heartbeat. The figure's arm never lowered. The thumb stayed out. The duffel bag stayed exactly where it was. He passed without braking. In the mirror, he saw the man turn gradually to watch the trailer go by, still holding his arm out. Daniel stared back until the figure was nothing but a dot in the red glow of his taillights. Then nothing at all. The CB stayed silent. The clocks did not agree. A creeping sense of repetition settled into him. The same silent miles. The same black fields. The same faint, almost non-existent shoulder. He glanced at the fuel gauge. The needle had barely moved in an hour, as if he had driven almost nowhere. His phone chimed softly with a low battery warning. The GPS icon froze for a second. Then the whole screen went black. He was alone with the soft purr of the engine, the whisper of tires on wet road, the twin beams of light reaching out ahead and being swallowed by the dark. He drove. There was nothing else to do. Minutes, or what felt like minutes, slid by. He did not look at the overhead clock anymore. He kept his eyes moving from lane to mirror, from mirror to shoulder, from shoulder back to the road. When he finally glanced at a mile marker again, it read, 200. He let out a slow breath, the kind that barely made a sound. His throat felt dry. A faint glow appeared far ahead, too steady to be another car, too constant to be lightning. As he drew nearer, he realized it was a rest area. Concrete building, a few lampposts, a cluster of vending machines under a lit awning. He didn't remember there being a rest area here. Still, the sight of any sign of civilization tugged at his exhaustion. His eyes ached. His back protested. It wouldn't hurt to stop for a minute. Use the restroom. Splash water on his face. Check his phone in proper light. He took the exit lane, the truck rolling down a gentle curve into the pool of fluorescent brightness. The parking lot was almost empty. No cars, no other rigs. Just his own headlights sweeping over painted lines, and a line of shadowy trees at the far edge. He pulled into a spot meant for larger vehicles, set the brake, and let the engine idle for a moment while he listened. Everything sounded normal. Air brake settled with a soft sigh. The dashboard clicked as a relay shifted. Nothing strange, nothing ominous. He shut the truck off. The sudden quiet felt startling after so much constant sound. Stepping down onto the asphalt, he noticed how unnaturally still the air was. No breeze stirred the trees. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting the place in a flat, almost colorless glow. Inside the small cinder block building, the tile echoed his footsteps. One of the sinks dripped steadily, each drop loud in the empty room. The mirror showed his own face, lined and pale, eyes rimmed with fatigue. He splashed water, blinked slowly, then dried his hands on the rough paper towels. As he reached for the door to leave, he heard it, a phone ringing, not his cell. A different, older sound, distant but clear. The trill of a payphone. He paused, hand on the door, listening. The ringing continued, steady and unhurried. There was a small alcove near the vending machines, just outside the restroom building. He'd noticed it when he pulled in a faded blue payphone mounted to the wall. Probably not used in years. It was ringing. He told himself to keep walking. To get back in the truck, start the engine, and roll back onto the highway. That was the wise, ordinary thing to do. He stepped out into the cool, electric-lit air and walked toward the phone. The handset hung neatly on the cradle. The little red in-use light blinked with each ring. No one else was around to answer it. No other vehicles, no other footsteps. Just the phone, calling and calling into an empty rest stop. He stood in front of it. The ringing felt louder up close, as if it filled the space between his ears. He lifted the receiver. The ringing cut off with a clean, sharp stop. For a second, there was nothing. Just a soft hiss of silence, like the quiet between radio stations. Then, very faintly, a voice spoke. "Don't stay," it said. The voice was his own. Not as he sounded right now, exactly, but close. A little older, maybe. A little rougher. Like someone who had been awake too long. The echo made his skin prickle. He swallowed. "Who is this?" Static swam faintly at the edges of the line, but the words were clear. "You have to keep driving," the voice said. "If you stay, it lines up. You won't like where it lines up. This some kind of joke?" He forced his voice to stay calm. The tiles, the fluorescent lights, the idle truck behind him. It all felt slightly unreal. "You saw the sedan already," the voice went on, ignoring his question. "You passed him on the shoulder. Don't talk to him. Don't let him in the cab. He's not alone." A shiver slid down his spine. He turned slowly, scanning the empty lot, expecting to see someone leaning against his truck, someone near the building's corner, laughing, recording on a phone. There was no one. "Who are you?" he asked again, softer this time. On the other end of the line, there was a pause. When the voice came again, it sounded closer, more certain. "Listen. This ends if you keep moving until you see the dawn. Don't stop again. Don't follow any exits that weren't there before. Don't answer a knock, if it comes from the passenger side window." His gaze drifted, almost against his will, to the truck. The passenger window reflected the harsh white lights of the rest area. "What happens if I do?" he asked. The answer came back in a whisper, nearly swallowed by a swell of static. "You don't get to leave the divide. Not really. You just start over. And over, and over." Something in the tone of that last "over" made Daniel's stomach twist. It was not a threat. It was weary, resigned. Like someone describing a storm that had already broken over them many times. The line crackled. It sounded suddenly far away, then close again. "I tried to warn you sooner," the voice said. "I thought I could change it. Maybe this time I can. Don't make me do this again." Daniel's hand tightened around the handset, knuckles pale. "This time?" he asked. But the other version of his voice didn't answer that. It only repeated, with a quiet, aching urgency, "Drive, until the sun comes up. Don't stop, no matter what." Then the line went dead. He listened to the empty hiss for several heartbeats before realizing there wasn't even that anymore. Just silence. The phone felt slightly colder in his hand. He set the receiver back on the hook carefully, as if it might shatter the moment it touched plastic. For a long second, he stood in the center of the rest area, feeling the lights buzzing overhead, the distant hum of his own cooling engine, the absolute absence of all other sounds. Then he turned and walked back to the truck. The driver's seat felt like a safe harbor the moment he pulled the door shut. He started the engine. The familiar rumble steadied his breathing. He didn't look at the clocks. He didn't look at the fuel gauge. He eased back onto the faded asphalt, back up the ramp, and merged onto the empty highway. The artificial glow of the rest stop fell away behind him, shrinking and vanishing like everything else had tonight. He drove. The road stretched out, black and straight. No more sedans appeared. No more hitchhikers raised their arms. The CB stayed quiet. The mile markers crept forward. 213. 214. 215. At some point, a thin gray light began to loosen the darkness at the edge of the sky. It was so gradual, he almost didn't notice when the stars winked out one by one. The land around him took on shape again, faint lines of fencing. The ghost of distant barns, a farmhouse porch light, still burning from the night before. When he passed the green sign reading, "Now leaving Divide County," his phone lit up by itself with a small chime. The screen came back to life. Battery at 20%. Time: 6:02 a.m. The clocks on the dash both read 6:02 a.m. as well. Ahead, the first hints of sunrise brushed the horizon, soft and pink and harmless. He made it to the distribution center an hour later. The yard was busy with idling trucks, yawning drivers, clattering pallet jacks. The world had returned to its normal noises. He logged his arrival, hauled open his trailer doors, and went through the motions of the morning. But part of him stayed on that empty stretch, listening for a phone that might still be ringing somewhere under a bank of buzzing fluorescent lights. Later, in a quiet corner of the driver's lounge, he opened his logbook and scrolled through his GPS history. The line of his route through Divide County was strangely short. The times didn't quite add up. There were gaps where there shouldn't be, and no sign of any rest area along that particular stretch of highway. He asked a few other drivers about it over the next weeks. Some shrugged. Some claimed there was never any rest stop there, not in the last 20 years. One older driver, a man with deep lines at the corners of his eyes, looked at him for a long moment before answering. "You see a blue sedan?" he asked quietly. "Hazards on?" Daniel hesitated. Then he nodded once. "You pick up the guy on the shoulder?" "No." The word came quickly, firmly. "No, I didn't." The older driver seemed to relax just a fraction. "Then don't," he said. "If you see him again. Or if you hear yourself on the radio. Or the phone. Whatever. Just keep going. That stretch, it does things to time. Always has. Far as I've heard." He stood up, collecting his thermos. "Me, I route around Divide County when I can," he added. "Costs me an extra half hour, but I like knowing my dawn is my dawn and not someone else's." He left Daniel alone with his cooling coffee and the quiet hum of the vending machines. From then on, when dispatch tried to send him through the divide at night, Daniel always found a reason to adjust his schedule, an invented delay, a necessary fuel stop, a claimed mechanical check. He would drive that stretch in broad, clear daylight, or not at all. Still, every so often, when the road is empty and the radio goes to static for no good reason, he thinks he hears the faint echo of his own voice in the distance, warning someone else to keep driving, to ignore the man on the shoulder with the patient eyes. And somewhere, in a rest area that might not always be there, a payphone rings in an empty room under humming fluorescent lights, waiting for someone who has stopped when they should have kept going. Story number 2. Maria preferred the late runs over the mountains. In the daylight, the pass was crowded with tourists and impatient commuters. At night, the road thinned out to a ribbon of headlights cutting through black pines and empty valleys. And the only company was the soft murmur of the radio and the steady breath of her engine. Fog brushed low along the guardrails that night, turning the reflector posts into pale, floating ghosts. Her trailer was full of dry goods headed east. Nothing fragile, nothing unusual. The air outside hovered just above freezing, the kind of damp cold that found its way into the cab no matter how high the heater was turned. She checked the dashboard clock. 2:03 a.m. The CB had been mostly quiet for the last half hour. A bit of weather talk, a joke or two, then silence. The road climbed steadily, curve after curve, the sign for Harlow Ridge Summit still 10 miles ahead. Her phone buzzed in its holder. A text from dispatch slid across the screen. New dot emphasis tonight. All trucks must stop at Harlow Ridge Way Station. No exceptions. Maria frowned. Harlow Ridge Way Station had been closed the last 3 years as far as she knew. Every time she passed, the building sat dark and empty, its windows boarded up, the closed sign hanging crooked across the entrance ramp. She thumbed her mic. "Anyone hear about Harlow Ridge reopening?" she asked into the CB. Her voice relaxed but curious. "Dispatch says I gotta stop in." Static hissed for a moment. Then a man's voice graveled through, faint but clear enough. "Negative, lady driver. Far as I know, Ridge has been shut since that fire." "Yeah," another voice chimed in, closer this time. "They moved inspection down to mile 30. Harlow's just a ghost box now." Maria glanced at her text again. "Maybe it's temporary," she said to herself. "Budget cuts. Reusing what they got." The next sign appeared out of the fog on the right, bright green letters catching in her headlights. Harlow Ridge Way Station, 5 miles. When flashing, all trucks must exit. Below it, yellow lights blinked in a slow, steady rhythm. She hesitated. Maybe the others just hadn't been through lately. Mountain rumors were like that, slow to update, quick to cling to old stories. The road curved again. Pines leaned in close, their tops lost in the mist. She passed another sign. Way station open. Prepare to stop. The lights were definitely flashing. She sighed softly, more out of habit than annoyance, and flicked on her turn signal. Fines were no joke. If enforcement had quietly reopened Harlow Ridge, missing it could turn a simple run into a headache of phone calls and citations. The off-ramp appeared through the fog like a gray tongue curling away from the main highway. She coasted down onto it, following the faded white line past a tall, motionless pine and a weathered reflector post. The building came into view a moment later. It was exactly where she remembered it. A low concrete structure with a row of windows overlooking the scale, a sloped metal roof, the same cracked asphalt lot. But tonight, the windows glowed with soft fluorescent light. The sign above the entrance door was lit, open. It looked alive again somehow. Not new, not refurbished. Just awake. She rolled forward slowly until the red light next to the scale lane changed to green. The overhead sign blinked. Trucks, one at a time. Pull forward when directed. Maria eased onto the scale. The old concrete edges were dark with moisture, slick with the fine mist in the air. The weight numbers flashed to life on the big digital display outside the window, red against gray. Her gross weight should have been just under 80,000. She knew that number as easily as she knew her own name. But the screen flickered strangely as the sensors registered her. For a second, the display showed ling 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 ling. Then the digits jumped, scrambled, and finally settled on a believable number. 79,480. She exhaled, not realizing she'd held her breath. Just a glitchy screen, that was all. Old system, rusty connections. A voice came over the speaker above her door, slightly distorted but calm. "Driver, set your brake and bring your paperwork inside, please." She pulled the brake, the familiar hiss giving her something solid to focus on. A light rain had started, soft drops ticking on the mirrors as she climbed down from the cab. The air smelled faintly of wet concrete and old oil. The building's fluorescent glow felt oddly flat against the fog, like a cutout of brightness pressed into the night. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was simple: scuffed tile, a counter with a glass partition, a row of bolted-down chairs. A coffee vending machine hummed to itself in the corner, its buttons faded. Bulletin boards lined one wall, maps and notices pinned in crooked layers. Everything looked a little dated, as if no one had redecorated in at least a decade. Behind the glass, a man in a state inspector's uniform sat at a metal desk. His hair was gray at the temples, his face lined but not unkind. An old analog clock ticked above his shoulder, its red second hand sweeping a lazy circle. "Evening," he said, looking up at her with tired eyes. His nameplate read, "Read." "Papers?" Maria slid her documents under the slot bill of lading, registration, inspection reports. He took them, with a slow, deliberate motion, the paper whispering against the counter. "You running for Halpern Logistics?" he asked. She blinked. "Yeah. You know them? Seen the logo?" he said. "You run this route often, Miss Ortiz?" He hadn't looked at the name on the papers yet. She was sure of it. "Couple times a month," she answered, a small edge of caution threading into her voice. He nodded, as if that confirmed something he'd already known. His finger tapped a pen against the desk in a rhythm that did not quite match the ticking clock behind him. "Logbook?" he asked. "Electronic." She lifted her phone slightly. "I can email, if you want." He smiled faintly. "We'll get to that. Hold tight a minute." He turned to his old computer terminal. The monitor was a bulky model she hadn't seen in years, the kind with a slight greenish tint. It flickered as he entered her details. In the quiet, Maria became aware of how still everything was. No other drivers in the chairs. No footsteps in the hallway. No printer whirring. No distant phone lines ringing in some back office. Just the hum of the fluorescents, the faint buzz of the coffee machine, and the slow scratch of Reed's pen. "You been driving long?" he asked without looking up. "About 7 years," she replied. He nodded again. "You ever had trouble up here?" She frowned slightly. "What do you mean, trouble?" "Snow, black ice, brake fade." His eyes lifted to hers. "Anything that made you feel like the mountain wanted you to stay." The clock behind him ticked on. The red second hand glided smoothly past 12, again and again. Maria couldn't remember hearing it tick before, but now each second sounded distinct. "Just weather," she said. "Nothing I couldn't handle." "Good," he said softly. "Good. You keep it that way." He stamped one of her forms with a dull thump. The sound echoed just a bit too much in the small room, as if it were larger than it looked. "Eld records," he said. "Go ahead and pull them up." She unlocked her phone and opened the logging app. The screen flickered as it synced, then showed her hours a straight, orderly line of on-duty, driving, brake. She slid it under the glass for him to see. He bent close to the screen. For a heartbeat, his reflection in the glass overlapped his face behind it, making a strange, doubled image. His brows furrowed. "These aren't right," he murmured. Maria's stomach dropped. "What's wrong with them?" His finger tapped at the display, though the glass separated him from actually touching it. "You show entering Harlow Ridge at 2:07, he said. "But you left here at 2:07 last time." She stared at him. "Last time?" Reed looked up slowly. "You don't remember?" he asked, voice gentle. The clock ticked. The coffee machine hummed. Somewhere far away, a truck horn sounded faintly, muffled by the walls. "I've never stopped here before," Maria said. His gaze held hers for a long, unsettling moment. "That's what you said then," he replied quietly. He slid her phone back under the glass. The screen had changed. Her log now displayed 2 entries for Harlow Ridge Way Station. Same time. Same date. One marked arrive. One marked depart. She hadn't made those. A soft shiver climbed her spine. "This station's been closed," she said, more to the room than to him. "Everyone says it burned." Reed's face didn't change, but something in his eyes darkened. "It did," he said. "Mostly." The fluorescence above him buzzed, a faint flicker rippling down the line of bulbs. For a second, the room dimmed, then brightened again. Lightning? She thought. But there had been no flash outside, no thunder. "Look," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "If this is some kind of glitch, I'll call my company. We can sort it out." "No," he said softly. "They won't hear you about this. They never do. Just listen a moment." He leaned forward slightly. Up close, Maria saw that the edges of his uniform patch were singed. The threads along one side melted into a dark, hardened curl. She hadn't noticed that when she walked in. "You and the others drive through here at night," he said. "You don't see the mile markers repeat. You don't feel the extra time shaved off your clocks. But it's there. The mountain takes its due. A few minutes, a few memories, once in a while more." She swallowed. The room felt too warm suddenly, the air thick. "What does that have to do with you?" she asked. His smile was small and sad. "I was supposed to keep things safe," he said. "Check brakes, check logs, make sure nobody tipped over the side because they pushed a little too hard." His eyes drifted to something over her shoulder. Something not there. Fire took the building, took me with it. But the job, he shrugged slightly. The job didn't stop. Maria heard her own heart now, a quiet drumbeat under the electric hum. I'm just here to make sure the mountain doesn't keep what it shouldn't, he said. To send a few of you back out when you wander in too far. You're saying I've been here before, she said, and I don't remember. Reed nodded once. You sat in that chair, he said, gesturing to the nearest bolt-down seat. You looked out at your truck like you weren't sure it was really yours. You told me about your first winter run. I told you to watch the descent on the east side. Then you left. And sometime later, you came back again. How many times? She whispered. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he slid a small slip of paper under the glass. It was the familiar weight ticket. Truck number. Company name. Gross weight. Timestamp. The time read 2:07 a.m. The date was 5 years ago. Her truck number was the same. So was her name. You can't expect me to believe. The building shuddered softly, as if a heavy wind had hit it. The lights flickered again, longer this time. For half a second, the room plunged into near darkness. In that dim space between flickers, Maria saw other shapes in the reflection of the glass. The outline of a woman in a high-visibility vest. A man with a baseball cap turned backward. Another driver slumped in a chair, head bowed. As the light steadied, the reflections vanished, leaving only her own pale face and Reed's lined one. The highway loops when it wants to, he said. Storms, fog, tired minds. You follow the line, and it folds back on itself just enough to steal an hour, or a life. He picked up his stamp again. This time, you've still got both, he went on. So I'm signing you out. You drop down the mountain, you take it slow, you don't stop at any station that shouldn't be there. You hear anything on the radio that sounds like you turn the volume down. He pressed the stamp onto her current weight slip with firm finality and slid it under the glass. On it, the time read 2:07 a.m. The date was today. The gross weight matched what she expected. Everything, on paper, looked perfectly ordinary. Why help? She asked, fingers closing around the slip. If you're stuck here, Reed looked down at the charred edge of his uniform patch and smoothed it with a thumb, even though it didn't change. Some of us don't get to leave the loop, he said quietly. But we can lean on it a little. Make sure a few of you slip out where you're supposed to. I'd like to think that counts for something. The analog clock behind him ticked louder, faster, the red second hand almost buzzing as it moved. You should go now, he added. You're about to arrive again, and I'd rather not meet you twice at once. Maria opened her mouth to ask what he meant, but a sound cut her off. The faint roll of tires on concrete, directly outside. Another truck pulling onto the scale. She turned toward the window. Her own rig sat out there in the fog, cab lights glinting off wet pavement. But behind it, half-formed in the mist, another Halpern logistics truck eased forward. Same color, same logo, same number on the side. Its headlights burned through the fog in a slow, ghostly approach. A soft chill swept through her. Out, Reed said gently. Now, he was on his feet, without her seeing him stand. His hand on the back door she hadn't noticed before, the one leading to a narrow hallway and an emergency exit sign glowing faintly green. Maria didn't argue. She pushed through the door he held open, walked the short corridor that smelled faintly of smoke and old wiring, and stepped out into the damp, cold air at the side of the building. The fog hugged close around her. Somewhere, her own engine idled, familiar and solid. Somewhere else, another set of brakes sighed. She rounded the corner of the building and stopped. There was only one truck on the scale. Hers. No second Halpern trailer. No twin cab. Just her rig. Waiting with patient headlights. Outlined in the pale glow from the office. The building's windows were dark. The open sign above the door was off. Boards were nailed haphazardly across two of the front panes. A faded, crooked sign hung over the entrance ramp. Closed. Use mile 30 station. The lot was cracked and weedy. The overhead lamps were dead. The analog clock inside the office, barely visible through a gap between boards, showed no time at all. Its hands were stopped at 12. Maria's breath came out in a thin cloud. Her fingers still clutched the fresh weight slip. She looked down at it. The paper was real, warm from her hand. The ink crisp, the time and date correct. A signature scrawled at the bottom in a firm, practiced hand. Read. She stood for a long moment, listening to the quiet rush of the mountain wind, the soft ticking of her cooling wheels, the distant, steady hum of the highway. Then she climbed back into her cab, closed the door carefully, and set the brake. Her radio crackled briefly as she pulled away from the dead station and merged back onto the main line. Eastbound? You making the summit yet? A familiar voice asked. She picked up the mic, eyes fixed on the dark stretch ahead. Yeah, she said. Just leaving Harlow Ridge. Static hissed for a heartbeat. Station's been closed for years, driver, the voice replied. You dreaming up there? Maria glanced at the weight slip on the dash, its edges curling slightly in the dry cab air. Maybe I am, she said softly. Either way, I'm heading down. Watch your brakes on the east side, the voice advised. Seen too many rigs cook 'em up there. I will, she answered. As she descended the long grade on the far side of the mountain, the fog began to thin. Stars winked through torn clouds. Far below, faint city lights glimmered like a scattered chain. Her clocks all agreed. Her log showed only one entry for Harlow Ridge tonight. The second, older entry was gone, as if it had never existed. She didn't tell dispatch what she'd seen. She didn't say anything to the other drivers, but she kept the signed weight slip folded neatly in her wallet, behind her license, where the edges sometimes brushed her fingers when she paid for fuel. Months later, on another night run, she passed the old station in clear weather. The building sat quiet and deserted under a bright moon. No lights, no cars, no sign of life. As she rolled by, the CB crackled weakly with a voice she barely recognized as her own, thin and far away. Driver, set your brake and bring your paperwork inside, please, it said. Maria turned the volume down to a whisper and kept her eyes on the road. She had no intention of stopping at Harlow Ridge again. Not while she still remembered how to leave. Story number 3. Dale liked the night shift at the refinery. The place felt different after midnight. Fewer clipboards, fewer managers, just a handful of workers in reflective vests moving through pools of orange sodium light. The tanks loomed like silent ships. Steam drifted from valves in slow, ghostly ribbons. His rig waited in lane 3, a long silver tanker gleaming under the yard lights. Freshly washed, polished so bright it caught every stray glow and turned it into a curved blur. He signed his paperwork, checked his seals, walked his usual circle around the truck, tires, hoses, caps, all in order. The cargo was standard, gasoline for 3 different stations along the coast highway, a route he'd run 100 times. By the time he rolled toward the gate, it was 1:40 a.m. The guard gave him a lazy wave and lifted the barrier. Beyond the fence, the world was darkness, and the faint, distant sound of waves. The coastal highway at night was its own country. On one side, black water stretched into nothing, broken only by the faint line of white foam where it met the rocks. On the other, hills rose and fell in waves of darker shadow, dotted by occasional porch lights far above. The road curved and leaned and climbed. 2 narrow lanes carved into the edge of the land. The weather was clear, air cool but dry. No fog, no rain, good driving conditions. The dashboard lights glowed softly, his gauges steady. In the mirrors, the tanker shone like a long, liquid moon. Older drivers at the yard liked to talk about this road. They had stories for every mile marker, rock slides, sudden crosswinds, headlights vanishing around tight turns. One story came up more often, usually when someone was new to hauling fuel at night. You get a polished tanker, watch what it shows you. An older driver named Conrad had told him once over bad coffee in the break room. Those barrels remember things. You see something in that skin that ain't on the road yet, you pay attention. Dale had laughed it off then. Polished stainless was like any mirror. Distortions, odd angles, tricks of light. You knew how to read it, or you didn't. Simple as that. Out on the highway, with nothing but his engine, and the low hush of the ocean for company, the memory of Conrad's warning came back with more weight. The first 2 deliveries went smoothly. Empty stations lit like islands of yellow in the dark. Sleepy clerks signing papers. The hiss of fuel channels filling underground tanks. Then back to the highway, odometer ticking steady, logs updating on his tablet. By 3:10 a.m., he was between stops, on the loneliest stretch. 40 miles of curves and cliffs, no real exits. Just the occasional dirt turnout or tiny fishing village crouched at the water's edge. Dale settled into the rhythm of it, eyes moving from lane to mirrors, mirrors to gauges, gauges back up to the road. A quarter moon hung low over the sea, its reflection broken by waves. In the passenger side mirror, the long side of his tanker tracked alongside him, chrome skin catching the lane stripes, the guardrail, the faint crown of his own cab lights. The reflection was curved, stretched, but familiar. 10 minutes later, he saw another set of headlights behind him in the mirror. Distant at first, then closing. A car low. Maybe a compact coming up faster than he liked. He kept his speed steady, hands relaxed on the wheel. The unwritten rule, if they wanted around him, they'd find a safe place to pass. His job was to be predictable. In the flat glass, the headlights were twin white stars. In the tanker's reflection, though, they were brighter, smearing into an oblong bar of light that flickered on the chrome like fire. He flicked his eyes between mirrors. The car gained, then tucked in behind him. Too close. Its lights filled the lower part of the mirror, dazzling, even with his anti-glare setting on. "Back off, buddy," he muttered under his breath. He reached for the CB mic, thinking maybe to give a little friendly nudge in case the driver was another trucker. Before he could thumb the button, the headlights vanished from the flat mirror. No gradual drop back, no sweep into the oncoming lane, just gone. He blinked and leaned forward slightly, scanning the road behind. Empty. Nothing but his own red marker lights haloing the dark. But in the tanker's curved reflection, two bright orbs still burned, fixed just behind his trailer axles, too close for any sane following distance. He felt the muscles in his back tighten. He checked the mirror housing, wiggling the adjustment tab with his fingers. The glass felt normal. No moisture, no cracks. He looked again. Nothing on the road. Lights in the tanker. He eased off the accelerator a touch, heart rate climbing despite himself. If someone really was riding that close, he wanted them around and gone. He put his right turn signal on for a couple of beats, a subtle invitation. You want by, now's your chance. The line behind him stayed empty. No car, no lights. In the tanker skin, the twin white smears slid a fraction farther down the silver curve, as if the unseen vehicle had closed the distance even more. For a second, absurdly, he thought he could feel it back there, pressure where no weight should be, a heaviness in the air. He stared ahead, jaw tight. Just glass and angle, he told himself aloud. Weird reflection, that's all. He kept his eyes strictly on the road for the next mile, refusing to look at the reflections. When he finally risked another glance, both mirrors showed only his trailer and the dark highway behind. No lights, no phantom car. He exhaled, slow and deliberate, and forced his shoulders to drop from around his ears. By the time he reached mile marker 118, the incident had slid back to the edges of his thoughts. He chalked it up to tired eyes and the way bright points of light could smear across shiny surfaces. Occupational hazard. The second strange thing did not involve lights at all. He was approaching a long, gentle right-hand curve carved into the cliffside. The rock wall rose to his left, the drop to his right hidden by a low barrier and darkness. He'd driven this section countless times. He knew the camber of the pavement, the subtle dip where rainwater liked to pool. He also knew that from his vantage point, he couldn't see more than a couple 100 feet ahead until he was deep into the bend. In his driver's side mirror, the tanker's belly was a ribbon of silver. As he tipped into the curve, the chrome began to show not just what was behind, but a stretched smear of what lay further along the bend, a warped, funhouse glimpse around the corner. Tonight, it showed red. A low, dull glow bloomed along the tanker's side, the shape of brake lights, 3 sets in a staggered line. The top one pulsed in a pattern he recognized as a hazard signal. But on the road ahead, around the edge of his headlights, there was nothing. Just smooth, empty asphalt, leading into the turn. He frowned. The sensation of being pulled 2 ways crept up on him, his eyes insisting on an open road, his peripheral vision whispering that something else was there. Around a corner his direct view couldn't yet reach. His foot hovered over the brake. Any southbound got eyes at 120? He asked into the CB, keeping his tone neutral. Seeing something weird up there. Static answered him at first. Then a voice broke through, thin but real. Southbound just past 120. a woman's voice said. "Road's clear, driver. You got nothing in front of you for at least a mile." Dale hesitated. The chrome still held the red glow, smeared brighter now, as if he were closing fast on some unseen taillights. Instinct beat logic by a hair. He eased onto the brake, bleeding off speed smoothly, letting his tanker settle back onto the grade. Not a panic stop, just enough to drag his pace down 20 miles an hour before he entered the heart of the curve. As he did, his headlights picked up something lying half in his lane. An overturned fishing skiff had slid down the rocky slope from the inland side, its faded hull now resting crookedly across the right-hand stripe. A tangle of rope and gear spilled out across the asphalt. One aluminum oar jutted into what would have been the center of his lane if he'd kept his original speed. He had room. Slower, centered. He steered smoothly around it, trailer following without protest. It was close, but not dangerous because he'd already shed speed. In the tanker's reflection, the red glow faded as he passed the obstruction, replaced by the pale wash of his own headlights. "Southbound, you still there?" he said into the mic, heart thudding a little faster than before. "You didn't see a boat in the road?" "No, sir," the woman replied. "Nothing but a tired possum and my own bad singing." "You all right?" "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, I'm good. Appreciate it." He clicked off and drove on, leaving the stranded skiff behind. The next 10 miles, he watched his reflections more carefully. Sometimes they showed nothing unusual. Sometimes a faint shimmer crossed the tanker skin that matched a change in wind. Once he saw the faint suggestion of a figure standing on the shoulder ahead, arm raised. But when he reached the spot, there was only a battered mile marker, leaning at a slight angle. The CB stayed mostly quiet. Dale delivered the last of his fuel to a sleepy station near a small harbor town and turned back toward the refinery with an empty tanker. The rig rode lighter now, a subtle spring in the suspension, the engine working easier. On the return leg, the highway felt even more deserted. It was nearing 4:30 a.m., that thin hour before dawn when the night seemed almost tired of itself. As he climbed toward the section known as the Shelf, a stretch where the road clung to the cliff in a long exposed line, his thoughts drifted. He barely heard the soft crackle on the radio at first. "Dale, you reading?" a voice said. He blinked and reached for the mic. "Go ahead," he answered, expecting dispatch. There was a pause, then the voice came again. It was male, mid-range, with a familiar roughness. It sounded a lot like Conrad. "Tank 74, you watching your mirrors?" it asked. Dale's hand tightened around the mic. "Conrad. That you?" he said, forcing a chuckle. "Thought you took the week off." No response. He checked the channel. Standard trucker band. Nothing obviously wrong. "Tanker 74, the voice repeated, just a little clearer this time. "Watch your trailer when you hit the shelf." "I'm on the shelf now," Dale said. "What am I supposed to be seeing?" Static bloomed suddenly, louder than before, then cut sharply as if someone had flipped a switch. The cab was left with only the hum of tires and the low vibration of the engine. He frowned and set the mic back in its cradle. The shelf opened fully around him. On his right, nothing but darkness above a guardrail. On his left, rock face. The road ahead rose gently, then leveled, pinned against the cliff like a tightrope. In the driver's side mirror, his empty tanker curved back, reflecting the pale striping of the lane and the steady white of his cab lights. For a few seconds, everything looked exactly as it should. Then the reflection shifted. He saw his own rig, but not from the angle the mirror should have shown. Instead of a side view, the chrome seemed to hold a three-quarter image, as if a camera were floating out over the ocean, looking back at his truck from just in front of the bumper. His cab headlights shone toward him in that impossible view. His own windshield glowed faintly. He could make out the silhouette of a driver inside the shape of shoulders, the curve of a hand on the wheel. The figure in that unreal angle did not move. Dale's heart climbed into his throat. He flicked his eyes to the actual road, then back to the chrome. The reflection hadn't changed. It still showed that wrong angle shot, the tanker stretching back into darkness, the cab a glowing insect at the front. In the reflection, up ahead on the road, a shape rested crosswise in the lane. Dark, long, with a low profile. A trailer of some kind, jackknifed. His real headlights showed only empty pavement. Sweat prickled along his spine. He slowed, not as much as before, but enough that the engine's note dropped. His hands felt clammy on the wheel. Not real, he murmured. Just a trick. Glass. Angle. In the chrome, the impossible camera seemed to drift closer, closing in on the obstruction ahead. The shape resolved into something clearer. A small box truck, its rear door crumpled, hazard lights blinking. In the real world, the road remained clear. He reached for the CB mic, then stopped. He realized his jaw was clenched so tight it hurt. As he crept forward, both realities held. The open lane before him and the mirrored one with a wreck blocking the way. He reached the midpoint of the shelf. There was no shoulder here, no safe place to stop. His options were limited. Trust what he saw directly, or trust the warped warning in the tanker. His phone, resting in its dash mount, buzzed once with a weak signal notification, then went dark again. He remembered Conrad's words. You see something in that skin that ain't on the road yet, you pay attention. A made his decision. Foot easing smoothly onto the brake, he brought his speed down further and guided the rig as far left in his lane as he safely could, flirting with the yellow center line. Not a swerve, he wouldn't risk that, but a prepared, cautious line. In the tanker's impossible view, his mirrored rig did the same. The wreck ahead loomed. In that strange window, he could almost see into the cab of the box truck. A shape slumped over the wheel. His actual headlights washed over nothing but paint and guardrail and rock. Then, from around the blind crest ahead, a real pair of headlights burst into view, wide and high, spun slightly off-center. A refrigerated box truck drifted over the center line, as if pulled by an invisible hand. Its front right tire rode the stripe. For a horrible second, it kept coming toward his lane. Because he had already slowed and edged left, the oncoming truck had just enough space to correct. It jerked back into its proper lane in an awkward lurch, rocking on its suspension. As it passed, Dale saw the driver's face, pale and wide-eyed, lit by the glow of a phone dangling from one hand. The two vehicles slipped by each other with room to spare, but only because he had already moved left and dropped speed. The gust of displaced air rattled his mirrors. He exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His hands tingled from how hard he'd been gripping the wheel. In the tanker's chrome, the wrong angle view dissolved, replaced by the normal smear of lane lines and dark road. The CB crackled once, faint, like a cough in a distant room. "You're welcome," a voice said quietly. It sounded like Conrad, but older somehow. Tired. Dale swallowed. "Conrad, that you?" he asked, voice rough around the edges. No answer. The channel went back to simple static. He finished the shelf with careful, measured movements, attention sharp as a knife point. When the road finally widened and straightened, he took the first turnout. He saw a gravel pull-off overlooking a dark, unseen drop to the waves below. He set the brake and stepped down into the cool air. The sea wind smelled of salt and something metallic from his own equipment. He walked slowly along the length of his tanker with his flashlight, the beam sliding over the polished steel. The chrome skin reflected the light back at him in pale streaks. Up close, he saw what looked like faint handprints near the front third of the tank. Not greasy, not dusty, just the ghost of pressure, like someone had pressed their palms against the metal long ago and the shine had taken a slightly different character there. Next to them, a vague, long smear marred the polish, darker in the center and feathering at the edges. It reminded him of something that had once been hot enough to change the metal's temper, then cooled. He touched it lightly. The steel was cold under his fingertips. "Tough run," a voice called from behind him. He turned. A bobtail tractor had pulled into the turnout, its own cab lights low. A man about his age climbed down, stretching his back. His jacket bore the logo of another fuel company. "Yeah," Dale said. "Almost had a head-on with a sleepy reefer back there." The man whistled softly. "Shelf?" he asked. "Yeah." The other driver nodded, his gaze drifting inevitably to the polished tanker. "Used to pull one just like that," he said. "Hated how much it showed me. Loved it too sometimes." He paused. "You run this road long?" "Couple years," Dale said. "You?" The man gave a slow shrug. "Long. Enough. You ever hear about the tanker that went over at mile 123? Dale shook his head. "No. Before your time then," the driver said. "Polished barrel, shiny as a mirror. Guy took the curve too hot in the rain. Trailer started to swing, took him right through the guardrail. They say the steel warped so bad in the fire it looked like it was trying to remember every flame that touched it. He looked at Dale's tanker more closely. Some of those barrels got scrapped, he went on. Some got patched, polished, put back in service. Metal like that doesn't forget much. Dale's eyes drifted to the faint handprints, the smear of heat mark. You think they remember? He asked, feeling vaguely foolish the moment the words left his mouth. The other driver considered. I think, he said slowly, when enough bad things happen in one place, or to one machine, sometimes the lines get crossed. Little warnings leak through. Little echoes. Maybe that's all a memory really is anyway. He rubbed his arms against the chill and stepped back toward his own cab. Either way, he added, opening his door, I'd keep that rig shiny. If it wants to show you something, better you see it clear than not at all. He climbed in, gave Dale a brief nod, and pulled back onto the highway, taillights shrinking into the dark. Dale stood for another minute beside his tanker, listening to the low boom of distant waves against unseen cliffs. Above, the stars were beginning to pale. When he climbed back into his cab, he adjusted his mirrors with careful, deliberate movements. Just enough angle to watch the lanes, not enough to turn the tanker's skin into a movie screen. As he rolled toward the refinery, he kept one eye on the road and one grudgingly on the chrome. The reflections ran steady and plain. No ghost cars, no impossible camera angles. Just his own rig and the line of highway drawing him home. At the yard, under the bright lights, he caught a last clear glimpse of himself in the tanker's side. Just a tired man in a ball cap, climbing down to hand in his papers. Later, when he sat in the break room, Conrad wandered in, smelling of diesel and coffee. Rough night? Conrad asked, dropping into the chair across from him. Dale looked at him carefully. You call me on the road? He asked. Conrad frowned. No. Radio in this heap's been dead 3 days. Why? Dale studied him for a second, then shook his head. Nothing, he said. Guess I was just listening to the wrong things. He didn't mention the phantom headlights, or the wreck that only existed in a reflection, or the voice that had sounded like Conrad's telling him to watch the shelf. But when the refinery offered to wrap his tanker in company graphics a month later, big matte decals that would dull the shine, he said yes without hesitation. The new look cut the glare and hid most of the chrome. Only a strip remained uncovered along the top. Thin and bright. Enough, he thought, in case it ever needed to show him something again. Just not enough to see everything. Story number 4. Jess always said the interstate at night felt like a river. By day it was cluttered and loud, full of darting cars and brake lights. After midnight, it narrowed to a slow, steady flow of headlights and marker lamps, everything moving in the same hushed direction. She was eastbound, hauling a dry van full of electronics, the kind of freight that didn't rattle or leak or need special handling. The sky over the plains was clear and empty, a black dome pricked with cold stars. Her dash clock read 12:47 a.m. She sipped coffee from a chipped thermos and rolled her shoulders. The last town was 30 miles behind. The next one was 40 ahead. Out here, the road was just a long, dark line between fields and low hills. No billboards, no rest areas, just an occasional farmhouse light way off in the distance. The CB was on but quiet, low static whispering under the engine's hum. She liked it that way, comforting. A sort of acoustic proof she wasn't the only one awake. She was thinking idly about the morning, drop the load, grab a quick motel nap, maybe call her niece before school when the radio clicked softly. Forming up after 90, a voice said, faint but clear enough. Midnight lines rolling. Any takers? Come on. Jess frowned and glanced at the channel display. 13. She usually left the radio on 19, but sometimes the unit scanned, if it lost a strong signal for long enough. Another voice came through, older and rougher, with a lazy drawl. Copy, lead dog. I'm a few out. Keep me a hole someplace in the middle. Don't stick me behind 3-leg again. Man rides his brakes like he's scared of gravity. A couple of muted chuckles crackled through the speaker. Jess listened, more amused than concerned. Sounded like some local convoy, maybe a club. She'd heard stories about night caravans guys who decided to run together for company, talking on a side channel, helping each other spot troopers and critters in the road. Midnight line, she said under her breath, tasting the words. The name had a nice rhythm to it. She thumbed the dial back to 19. The CB fell quiet again. The highway sign flashed up in her beams. Fog area next, 20 miles, use caution. Ahead, the world began to soften. A low-ground mist spilled over the fields, pooling in the shallow dips, turning the median into a white river. The road remained clear at first, the fog just a faint veil along the edges. Jess eased her speed down a couple miles per hour. Nothing dramatic, just respect. She remembered a story her trainer, Mac, had told her during her first winter on the road. "They get you when you're tired and wanting out," he'd said, staring at the window of a truck stop like he could see something beyond the parking lot. You'll hear him sometimes, late, when the scales are closed and the sky's empty. Convoys that don't stop. Once you're in, you don't leave. They call it the midnight line. She'd laughed it off then, chalking it up as another old-timer's tale. Something to fill the long hours. The fog thickened. It rolled across the asphalt now in slow curls, swallowing the white stripes and spitting them back out a few feet ahead. Her high beams made it worse, so she dropped back to low, letting the road come to her in shorter, gentler pieces. Headlights appeared in her mirror. Distant at first, then closer. A single pair, climbing the gentle rise behind her. She watched them absently. In the flat glass, they looked normal. 2 white dots, steady and calm. Then they slid sideways in her mirror, not the way ordinary lights did when someone changed lanes, but with a kind of smooth, deliberate glide. A cab over tractor emerged from the fog behind them, box trailer in tow. Jess frowned. The truck was old. Not the chrome and LED kind of old you saw at shows, but genuinely out of date. Square headlights. Company logo painted on the cab door, in the style of the late 70s thick, looping script. North Star Freight. She hadn't seen that name in years. Her dad had talked about them, gone under decades ago. The cab's marker lights were dimmer than most modern rigs, a soft amber instead of harsh orange. Its trailer had faded white panels, no modern reflective tape, just thin, worn-out red strips near the back. It pulled in behind her, maintaining a polite, textbook-following distance. Not too close, not too far. "Well," she murmured, "somebody's babying an antique." In the right mirror, another pair of lights bloomed from the fog. A long-nosed Peterbilt this time, deep blue with an unfamiliar logo on the side. Trans. Southern Haulage. The letters looked just as dated as the first trucks. He settled in behind North Star, perfectly spaced. Jess checked her speed. Legal. Steady. She wasn't being boxed in. That was the important thing. She flipped the CB back to channel 13 without quite deciding to. "Got Blue Jay and North Star tucked in," the first voice was saying. Calm, measured. "We're open behind the lady in the white van. Plenty of room if any stragglers catch up before 95. Yes's skin prickled. She was driving a white Cascadia, pulling a white dry van. She didn't touch the mic. Didn't say a word. "Copy," another driver answered. "I'm still back around 80. 1. Might miss this one." "Road's long," the first voice replied, amused. "There's always another run. Midnight line doesn't retire." The fog closed in tighter. The world outside her windshield shrank to a gray tunnel lit by her beams. Only the faint silver line of the guardrail and the stripes under her wheels told her she was still in the lane. Her dash clock read 12 m. Up ahead, a new pair of taillights appeared, as if sliding out of the fog itself. Another tractor trailer, this one painted a ghostly pastel green. Its company name was too faded to see clearly, but its trailer doors bore an old slogan in big block letters. "We deliver on time, every time." It rolled exactly 200 feet in front of her. Jess didn't know that distance for certain, but the spacing felt precise. Same gap between her and the green rig as between her and North Star, and between North Star and the blue Peterbilt behind him. 4 trucks, perfectly staggered, moving as one. Her phone, sitting in its cradle, lost its faint data symbol and dropped to no service. She told herself that was normal. Fog, remote area, spotty coverage. Still, her fingers brushed the steering wheel a little tighter. The CB clicked. "New tail, you with us, Jess?" the first voice asked. She swallowed, eyes flicking to the channel display. 13. She had never said her name. She picked up the mic anyway, more out of reflex than decision. "Depends who's asking," she said, keeping her tone light. Didn't know I'd signed up for a party. A chuckle rolled through the speaker, joined by a couple of softer laughs. Name's Lead Dog, the primary voice said. It had no accent she could peg, just a calm, practiced cadence. You slid in nice and neat. Figured we'd keep you. You've been thinking about it anyway. Thinking about what? Running free, Lead Dog said. No dispatch, no receivers, no alarm clocks, just the road and the line and the hum of the engine. That sounds the only calendar that matters out here, isn't it? Jess didn't answer. He wasn't wrong. She'd had nights in lonely motels when she'd stared at the ceiling, wondering how long she could keep doing this. Weeks when the idea of just driving and never going back to any terminal had a strange appeal. But that was just normal driver fatigue and fantasy. Everybody thought about quitting sometimes. We got room, Lead Dog went on. Always one more slot. Folks drop out now and then, and somebody's got to fill the gap. Ahead, the green truck's taillights glowed faintly through the mist. They were an older style, small, round, a deeper red than modern LEDs. In Jess's peripheral vision, something odd nagged at her. She flashed a glance into her left mirror. The reflection showed the convoy. Green truck, her white rig, North Star behind, then the blue Pete. All 4 sets of headlights and markers painted in soft streaks along the side of her trailer, but the angle was a little off. In the mirror, the spacing between the trucks looked longer, stretched, like the road had been pulled. She checked the mile marker ahead. 92. Her dash clock still said 1:02 a.m. Where you all headed? She asked, trying to sound casual. Big warehouse sale or something? Does it matter? Lead Dog said. You've run enough drop lots to know they blur together. All our exits are closed. No more last-minute changes. No more rescheduling. Just the line. Something in the way he said, line, made her think of a rope stretched taut between invisible anchors. She clicked her turn signal on for a moment, more out of habit, just to see if it got a reaction. The green truck ahead didn't change speed. North Star behind her held exactly where he'd been. Careful, new tail, a different voice said softly. It came from one of the other trucks. She didn't know which. Older, reedy. Don't drift. It's thin out there. The fog pressed closer against the cab glass. Visibility dropped further. Her world was nothing but lane, lights, and the low, patient murmur of the convoy on Channel 13. She switched the CB to 19 and keyed the mic. Any eastbound around 92 getting this weather? She asked. Visibility's tanking. Silence. She tried 9, tried 17, tried scan. Every channel hissed the same even static, like distant surf. Back on 13, voices murmured softly, men and women talking about roads that no longer existed, truck stops that had been bulldozed, fuel prices that made no sense. Stopped at Red Rock Plaza last week, one said. Coffee was 35 cents. Still watery as ever. Red Rock's gone, LT, another replied, amused. Been a mall there since 99. You're behind. Jess's heart rate picked up. The trucks around her did not wobble, did not brake, did not speed up or slow down. Their discipline was uncanny, even in her mirrors. In the warped band of reflection, their spacing was mathematically correct. The next mile marker emerged from the fog on her right. 93. 2 minutes later, another 93. Her throat went dry. She glanced at her dash clock. 1:02 a.m. It hadn't changed. Her phone screen glowed on the dash, frozen on the same time. Memories slid together in her head. Max warning, talk in driver lounges about a convoy that runs between miles that don't add up. Half-joking comments about ghosts with CB handles. You get used to it, Lead Dog said, as if sensing her thoughts. The clocks stop mattering. You feel the road in your bones. No more logbooks, no more hours of service. You just drive until you don't want to anymore. Then you drive a little more. She thought of her niece, waiting for a souvenir keychain from every new state. Her sister, texting "be safe" every time she knew Jess was rolling through a storm. Her father, retired and gruff, secretly proud every time she sent a photo from another terminal. She thought of the small things, the way the cat at her favorite truck stop always found the warmest hood to sleep on. The quiet of Sunday afternoons at home, when she could hear her neighbor's wind chimes. I'm not done yet, she said quietly into the mic. The convoy fell silent for a heartbeat. "You sure?" Lead dog asked, no anger in his voice, just steady curiosity. "You've thought about being done, we heard you. Lot of nights, parked on some shabby on-ramp, wondering what it'd be like to just keep going." "Thinking isn't the same as choosing," she replied. "I've still got places to be." Ahead, through the murk, a green sign loomed into view on the right. "Rest area, 1 mile." Her pulse kicked. Lead dog's voice came back, sharper now. "Ignore that," he said. "Closed for construction. Been closed a long time. We stay in the lane. Safer in the line." She remembered something else Mac had said, almost as an afterthought, years ago. "If you ever find yourself running with more company than there ought to be, and the mile markers don't behave, don't follow the lights," he'd told her. "Follow the dark. They own the lanes. You get out where there's no line. Kill your beacons. Let them pass." It had sounded like nonsense then. Ritual words from an old superstition. Now they slotted into place, with a clarity that made her chest ache. "Appreciate the invite," she said, keeping her voice steady. "But I'm going to sit this one out." She clicked off before Lead Dog could respond. Slowly, as if nothing were wrong, she eased her foot down off the throttle. 2 miles an hour. 4. 6. Her cruise control grumbled and disengaged. The gap between her and the green truck ahead began to grow. In the mirror, North Star's grille swelled larger. For the first time, one of the convoy trucks changed behavior. North Star's marker lights flickered. His headlights dimmed and brightened, like someone feedback tapped the switch. "Don't fall out of line, Jess," a voice said quietly over the speaker. It didn't sound like Lead Dog now. It sounded like several voices at once, layered thinly. "It's thinner back there." Lonely. Her hands trembled on the wheel, but her movement stayed precise. Right turn signal on. A tiny shift of the wheel toward the empty lane. Eyes on the road, not the mirror. Fog wrapped around her like cotton. The white line on the right appeared and vanished under her hood. She slipped into the slow lane. The rumble strips growled softly as she crossed them, then smoothed out. Behind her, North Star held dead center for a second as if debating, then slid gracefully into the fast lane to stay with the convoy. Jess watched, heart hammering, as all 3 trucks ahead glowed a shade brighter. Their shapes seemed to stretch, just a little, as they moved past. For a moment, through the haze, their trailers looked wrong. Their sides were crumpled in places, paint scored, outlines not quite matching the clean lines she'd first seen. She thought she saw twisted metal, windows smashed into patterns like frost, wheels pointing at impossible angles. She forced her eyes back to the pavement. The exit sign arrived like a promise. "Rest area 1/2 mile. Next right." No barricades, no closure warnings, just a standard blue sign. She flipped her signal again, hands moving almost painfully slowly. Her trailer followed obediently. On channel 13, a loud shriek of feedback cut through the cab, high and thin, making her flinch. Then the speaker thumped once and went dead. The exit ramp rose out of the fog, a low hill into darkness. She took it at a cautious 15 miles an hour, hazard lights ticking softly. The mainline highway drifted away to her left. As she climbed, the fog thinned. The lights of the convoy bled into the white for a few seconds more, then vanished entirely. At the top of the ramp, the rest area spread out. A quiet lot with a few cars, 2 other trucks pulled up nose. Into the trees, a low building with vending machines glowing under an awning. 1 yellow sodium light buzzed above the restroom doors. Everything looked ordinary. Jess pulled into the truck parking row and set her brake. Her hands left damp prints on the wheel. She sat there, listening. The ticking of cooling metal, the faint rustle of leaves somewhere in the darkness. In the far distance, over the hill and through the trees, the low rolling murmur of semis passing on the highway. For just a moment, that sound seemed like more than traffic. It had a pattern to it. A steady, measured thrum, like a heartbeat traveling through concrete and soil. A knock on her driver's door made her jump. She twisted in her seat. An older man stood on the step outside, hat in hand, reflective vest half-zipped. His face was lined, his beard trimmed close. His eyes held the familiar, tired kindness of someone who'd spent too many years in truck stop parking lots. She cracked the window. "You all right?" he asked. His voice was gentle, edged with curiosity, not pushy. Saw you come up off the ramp pretty white, knuckled. She hesitated, then nodded. Fog got thick out there, she said. It was true enough. He studied her for a moment longer. Run this stretch much? He asked. First time at night, she answered. He nodded slowly, as if that confirmed something. Smart, taking the exit, he said. They run hard between 90 and 100. They like the tired ones, the ones thinking about being done. Jess swallowed. You've seen them? Once, he said. His gaze drifted past her cab window, toward the unseen highway. Long time ago. Different rigs. Same feel. I stayed with them too long. Next morning, I was near a town I'd already passed hours before. Logbook didn't make sense for weeks. He looked back at her. They don't like when somebody drops out, he added. Might be they'll look for you again if you keep ticking through their hours. I'd route around that stretch after midnight for a while if I were you. Or roll it in daylight. Jess managed a thin smile. Planning on it, she said. He tipped his hat. Get some rest, he said. Road'll still be there in the morning. He climbed down and walked back to his own truck, boots scuffing softly on the pavement. Jess sat for a long moment, fingers loosely curled in her lap. Her dash clock now read 1:39 a.m. Her phone agreed. She opened her log app. The GPS trace showed a clean, simple line. Highway eastbound, exit to rest area. No miles repeating, no time unaccounted for. When she eased back onto the interstate an hour later, the fog had lifted. The stars were fading in the east, a hint of gray seeping into the sky. She drove past mile 93, then 94, then 95, each sign spaced exactly where it ought to be. In full daylight, she glanced once at the CB and turned it on. Channel 19 buzzed with ordinary chatter-scale house gossip, weather updates, someone complaining about a slow four-wheeler. No one mentioned a midnight line. Weeks later, in a diner somewhere 2 states away, a news segment played on the dusty TV in the corner. An anniversary piece about a massive chain reaction crash from the early 90s, thick fog, multiple trucks, fatalities. Grainy photos showed a tangled mess of rigs at mile 96 on a lonely stretch of interstate. Jess's fork paused halfway to her mouth. In one of the photos, nearly obscured by smoke and emergency lights, she saw the side of a cab over, with North Star Freight painted in looping script. In another, the crushed remains of a pastel green trailer with the slogan, "On time, every time," barely visible on its twisted doors. She looked down at her plate, appetite dimming. Back in her truck, when she programmed routes, she started to add a note of her own next to that lonely segment of highway. Avoid after midnight. Sometimes, on late runs far from that place, the CB would crackle with random noise. If she ever heard a calm, measured voice say, "Midnight line's forming," she reached out and turned the volume dial gently down until the static was no more than a whisper under the engine's steady song. There were still nights when she felt the pull of the road, the tempting thought of never having to park, never having to answer a phone or sign a receipt again. When those came, she would picture the perfect spacing of those old rigs, the way the mile markers had lied, the way her clocks had frozen. And she would remind herself that part of what made the highway beautiful was that it always led somewhere, some small town, some familiar diner, some front door with lights on. She kept driving, but she did not join the line. Not yet. Not while she still had reasons to arrive. Story number 5. Carter liked the desert runs because they were honest. No sudden fog, no surprise ice, no mountains trying to shove 80,000 pounds sideways. Just long, empty stretches of asphalt under a big sky, the air dry and clean, the horizon a flat line that never quite moved. He was hauling auto parts east that night, a sealed dry van and a tight delivery window. Dispatch had rerouted him off the main interstate hours earlier because of an accident and sent him down a state highway he didn't know well. 2 lanes, no shoulders worth speaking of, nothing but sand, scrub, and the occasional barbed wire fence. The dash clock read 1:18 a.m. His fuel gauge sat a little lower than he liked. There'd been a headwind most of the evening that chewed more diesel than planned. Not enough to panic, but enough to make him keep a closer eye on the needle. The radio had long since run out of local stations. The CB, set on 19, hissed softly, no other voices in range. The stars outside his windshield were sharp and clear, scattered thick across the black sky. A green highway sign loomed up out of the dark on the right, reflective paint catching his headlights. Last Chance Plaza. 1 mile. Fuel food showers. Truck parking. Carter frowned. He checked his GPS. No service. The cached map showed nothing for another 40 miles, but a tiny rest area with no fuel. He'd never heard of Last Chance Plaza, and after 15 years of running this region, he thought he knew every truck stop with halfway decent coffee. Maybe it was new. Maybe it was small enough not to matter to the apps. The fuel gauge crept down another hair. Last chance, huh? He muttered. Name fits. The off-ramp appeared a minute later, a simple right-hand curve dipping away from the highway. A small lit sign with an arrow pointed down it. Plaza, open 24 hours. He signaled, checked his mirrors. The road behind him was still empty, and eased onto the ramp. The darkness thinned as he descended. Sodium lights glowed ahead, throwing soft orange halos over a cluster of low buildings and fuel islands. The place wasn't big, maybe 4 truck lanes at the diesel pumps, a modest store, and a squat, flat-roofed diner with a faded red sign. Last Chance Plaza, the sign said in flaking paint. Nothing fancy. No national brand logos. Just the name and a drawing of a smiling coffee cup. The lot was mostly gravel, with a strip of cracked asphalt near the pumps. 3 other rigs were parked along the outer edge, sleepers dark, marker lights off. Their silhouettes looked dated somehow. Squarer cabs, rounder fuel tanks. He couldn't make out the company names from this angle. He pulled up to the diesel pump nearest the store and shut down his engine. The sudden quiet felt almost loud after hours of constant vibration. The air outside was warm and still, smelling faintly of hot sand and old fuel. Crickets clicked somewhere beyond the edge of the lot. Inside, the store was small but bright. A few aisles of snacks and basic supplies, a cooler with drinks, a rack of worn t-shirts that said things like, "I survived Last Chance and I braked for mile 247. A woman stood behind the counter, reading a paperback. She looked to be in her 50s, hair pulled back, name tag that read Lorraine. She glanced up as he came in and smiled like she'd been expecting him. "Evenin' Carter," she said. "Cutting it close on fuel, aren't you?" The back of his neck prickled. He hadn't worn his company badge. His truck didn't have his name on the door. He didn't remember introducing himself. "Dispatch must have called ahead," he said, forcing a small shrug. "Said you were my last stop before tumbleweeds." "Dispatch doesn't know about us," Lorraine said mildly. "But the road sends who it sends." She slid a key across the counter, an old brass thing with the number 3 stamped into it, and a big plastic fob labeled showers. "Get yourself topped off and come in for coffee," she added. "Diner still serving. First cups on the house." Diners. Still serving." He hesitated, then nodded. "Appreciate it." He swiped his card at the pump. The screen was old and green, the buttons a little stiff, but it approved his purchase without asking for a zip code. Diesel gushed into his tanks, the hose vibrating faintly in his hand. When he looked up, he noticed the sky. Out on the highway, the stars had been endless. Here, above the plaza, they seemed fewer somehow. The sky felt lower, like a dark ceiling instead of a vast dome. It was subtle enough that he almost wrote it off as imagination. Inside the diner, a bell over the door chimed softly when he stepped in. The place was straight out of 30 years ago. Vinyl booths, a long counter with round stools, a jukebox in the corner that looked like it might still take quarters. A few framed black and white photos hung on the walls, old trucks, smiling drivers. The plaza sign looking much newer. Only 3 customers sat inside. One was an older man in a plaid shirt, nursing a coffee at the counter. The other 2 were at separate booths, both truckers by the look of their work boots and jackets, both staring into their cups like they were listening to something he couldn't hear. A waitress appeared from the kitchen, balancing a tray. She wore a pale blue uniform and a white apron, her dark hair pinned up in a tidy knot. Her name tag said AMY. She smiled at him like she knew him too. "Coffee?" she asked, already reaching for a mug. "Sure," he said. "Black's fine." Figured. She poured without asking. The mug she chose the size and shape he preferred, not the smaller, one stacked beside it. He slid into a booth by the window. Outside, his truck sat in the glow of the lot lights, clean and solid. Beyond it, the desert was just a dark wall. He picked up the menu. The plastic was worn at the edges, the print slightly faded. The prices looked like they were from another decade. The older man at the counter glanced over. "Where are you out of?" he asked. "Phoenix," Carter replied. "Headed to Amarillo." "Long night," the man said. "Good thing you saw the sign." Carter hesitated. "What sign?" "Last chance," the man said, like it was obvious. "Some folks blow right by. They don't always get another shot." Amy set a plate in front of him, eggs, toast, hash browns, exactly what he would have ordered, though he hadn't yet said a word about food. He looked up. "I didn't." "How special?" she said, cutting him off gently. "Traveler's plate. You look like you need it." He should have felt annoyed. Instead, he felt an odd, sleepy gratitude. He was more tired than he'd realized. As he ate, his eyes drifted to a corkboard on the far wall. 2 hand-lettered lists were pinned there. The first, on white paper, read, "Stayed and moved on." Beneath it, rows of names, written in different inks and hands. Some had dates next to them. Some just had first names and company initials. The second list, on yellowed paper, was smaller. Stayed and stayed. There were fewer names there, no dates. Just neat, careful writing. At the bottom, a note in smaller script. "No more room." Carter swallowed a mouthful of toast a little too hard. "Local tradition?" he asked, nodding toward the board. Amy followed his gaze. Her smile dimmed a fraction. "Something like that," she said. "We like to remember who made it through." Lorraine from the store came in carrying a stack of paper towels. She paused beside his booth. "Tank's full," she said. "Receipts in the cab printer. Parking's free as long as you like." "Just one thing." "What's that?" he asked. "When you shut down for the night," she said evenly, "close your curtains and don't open them again until the sun is up. Not for any reason. Not for any voice. You understand me?" The diner seemed to get quieter. Even the muted hum of the fridge behind the counter felt like it softened to listen. He tried to grin. "You get a lot of thieves?" Amy's expression didn't change. "We don't get thieves," she said. "We get visitors. They don't come inside. They stay out in the lot. They like the trucks." Lorraine nodded. "They'll knock, maybe," she said. "They'll call your name. Might sound like somebody you know, might sound like somebody you don't. Doesn't matter. Don't open your curtains. Don't answer your door. Do that, and you'll have breakfast with us. Don't—" She let the sentence trail off. The older man at the counter stared into his coffee. "Some folks don't listen," he said quietly. "You won't see them on that white list." Carter's mouth went dry. "Is this a joke?" he asked, keeping his voice light. "Some kind of local hazing for new drivers?" "No joke," Amy said. "You're tired. Road's been long. That's when they try. Just follow the rule. That's all." He thought about laughing it off, but something in their faces stopped him. They weren't trying to spook him. They looked worried. The way people looked when they knew what could happen and couldn't stop it. He finished his meal in a thoughtful silence. Outside, the lot seemed normal. One of the other trucks had its curtain pulled. The third had its cab dark. A sunshade wedged in the windshield. He parked at the far edge, nose out, pointing toward the exit back to the highway. Habit, in case anyone tried to box him in. The gravel crunched under his tires. He did his walk around out of routine more than need. Tires, latches, doors all fine. The desert stretched away, empty and dark. Inside the cab, the familiar cocoon of his sleeper wrapped around him. He drew the heavy curtains across the windshield and side windows, the fabric whispering on its track. The world outside became a dull orange glow at the edges. He checked the time. 2:07 a.m. He lay down on the bunk, the faint hum of his fridge and the tick of cooling metal the only sounds. At some point, he drifted off. He didn't know how long he'd been asleep when the first sound came. A soft tap on the driver's door. Not loud. Just enough to stir him. He blinked in the dimness, disoriented. For a second, he thought it was rain. Then the tap came again, more deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. He remembered Lorraine's voice. Once you shut the curtains, he stayed still, heartbeat picking up. Another knock. Closer this time, like it was right next to his ear, though the wall was between them. "Carter?" a voice called softly. "Hey, you awake in there?" It sounded like his brother. Same tone, same half-amused drawl. His brother who lived 3 states away and had no idea where he was that night. Carter's hand tightened on the blanket. "Rough road out here," the voice went on. "Could use a ride. Open up a second." His throat felt tight. "Not real," he whispered to himself. "You're dreaming." The truck rocked, just a little, like someone had put a hand on the frame and leaned. "Come on," the voice said. "It's cold." The air in the cab was warm. Something moved past the front tires, gravel crunching softly. A faint scraping sound traveled along the side of the trailer, like fingertips brushing metal. From the passenger side, another knock, lighter, almost playful. "Carter?" This time it was a different voice, higher. His niece, maybe, if she'd been older. "You promised you'd visit." He squeezed his eyes shut. "They know your name," he thought. Of course they do. Footsteps padded back and forth outside, sometimes light, sometimes heavy enough that he felt them through the mattress. Once, something thumped softly against the trailer, right where his head would be on the other side of the wall. The knocks changed. Some were polite, some were impatient, a quick rattle of fist on metal. Between them, silence thick enough to hear his own pulse. Minutes stretched. Or maybe longer. The clock on his dash was hidden by the curtain. His phone lay face down. Once, the handle on the driver's door clicked gently, as if being tested. "Don't be rude," a new voice said from just beyond the glass. It was flat, neither male nor female, with a strange stillness to it. "We came all this way." The truck shifted again on its suspension. He pictured shapes moving in the sodium light, circling the rig, brushing invisible hands along its sides. He almost called out, almost said, "Go away," just to hear his own voice. He bit the words back. Any answer felt like opening a door. The sounds went on in waves, knocks, footsteps, scrapes, periods of quiet. Once, what sounded like laughter, but blurred, like a recording played underwater. His muscles ached from staying so still. He focused on his breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth, slow, quiet. At some point, faint light began to bleed around the edges of the curtain, a softer color than the harsh yellow from the lot lamps. Paler, cooler. The sounds outside faded with it, thinning like mist in Sunday. By the time the thin strip of light at the bottom of the curtain had turned a clear, honest daylight gray, the lot was silent again. He lay there a few minutes more, waiting, listening. Nothing. His legs felt unsteady when he swung them down from the bunk. He drew the curtain back a few inches. The sky was pale blue, the sun low but bright over the horizon. His truck sat exactly where he'd left it. The other rigs were still there, their cabs quiet. He opened the door and climbed down. The gravel around his truck was a mess. Boot prints crisscrossed the ground in no particular pattern. Some looked fresh, the edges sharp. Others were older, softened by time. They overlapped each other in layers, pointing every direction at once, like people had been wandering aimlessly for a long while. In between them were other marks, long, faint drags, as if something heavy had been pulled slowly around and around his rig. Circular scuffs that didn't match any tire tread, he knew. Places where the gravel was pressed down hard, then abruptly untouched. He walked a slow circle, the hairs on his arms rising. On the back of his trailer, near the latch, someone or something had traced a line through the dust on the door. Just one word, written in a careful, looping hand, "Stay." He reached up and wiped it away with the flat of his palm, heart drumming faster than a simple smudge should warrant. Inside the diner, the bell chimed when he stepped in. The smell of coffee and bacon washed over him, comfortingly ordinary. Amy poured him a mug without asking. "Sleep all right?" she asked. He considered lying. "Heard some knocks," he said instead. She nodded once, like she'd expected that answer. "But you didn't open up," Lorraine said from the counter, counting bills into the register. "You're here. That's what matters." He swallowed a mouthful of too hot coffee. "What happens if you do?" he asked. The older man at the counter didn't look up from his plate. "Sometimes," he said, "we find the truck in the morning. Doors open, lights on, no driver. Sometimes we don't find the truck at all, just a gap in the gravel where wheels used to sit." Amy's gaze drifted toward the corkboard. The stayed and stayed list had one more name than he remembered from the night before. He couldn't be sure. He hadn't looked that closely. "How long has this place been here?" he asked. Lorraine smiled faintly. "As long as the road's been taking more than it should," she said. "We're not always where folks expect us. But when someone's running on empty and the line's thin..." She shrugged. "Sometimes we're close enough to help. If they listen." He paid his bill. The register rang with a soft, old-fashioned ding. When he climbed back into his truck, the highway felt both inviting and faintly unreal, shimmering in the heat even in morning light. As he merged back onto the state route, he checked his mirrors. Last Chance Plaza shrank behind him. Fuel islands, diner, store, the 3 parked rigs, the sign with the smiling coffee cup. For a second, just before the curve of the ramp hid it from view, the plaza seemed thinner, like a reflection on glass. The lot lights looked dimmer than daylight should make them. The building edges fuzzed, as if heat waves were rising off them even though the air was still cool. Then the highway swallowed the view. 10 miles later, his phone signal came back, a little bar of reception blinking to life. His GPS map refreshed with a jerky jump. The route line appeared, a clean blue path across the desert. He glanced at the screen. There was no marker for Last Chance Plaza. No icon, no name. Just empty space where the exit had been. He slowed slightly as he passed mile marker 247. On the right, a wide, dusty turnout lay deserted. No buildings, no pumps, just a big, faded billboard frame with nothing on it but sun-bleached wood. If there had ever been a plaza there, it was gone. He drove on, the desert stretching ahead, honest and bright. Over the following months, he heard other drivers mention strange, small places that hadn't been on their maps. A diner in the middle of nowhere where the coffee was always hot and nobody ever paid with cards. A rest area that only appeared on foggy nights. A fuel stop whose receipts never printed a street address. He didn't talk about Last Chance by name. He didn't want to test whether saying it out loud would bring it closer. But sometimes very late, when the highway was empty and his eyelids felt heavier than they should, he'd think of Lorraine's steady gaze and Amy's warning. Close your curtains. Don't open them until sunup. He kept a simple rule after that. If he was tired enough to see things in the dark, he stopped before the road chose a last chance for him. And on the rare nights when he heard a knock in a truck stop lot, faint and polite, on someone else's door, he rolled over, pulled the curtain edge a little tighter, and let whoever was outside keep looking for someone who would answer. As the wheels slow and the night settles back into its uneasy quiet, remember some stories don't stay behind in the dark. Out on those endless highways, shadows still drift, waiting for another traveler bold enough to pass through their territory. If you made it to the end, you're braver than most. Don't forget to like the video, share your own eerie experience in the comments, and subscribe to The Sleep Haunt so you never miss another journey into the unknown. Sleep well, if the road lets you.